My name is Serafina, and I am 28 years old. Last Thursday night changed everything I believed about family loyalty. Sitting at our weekly dinner table, my mother called me a failure in front of everyone, while praising my golden child brother Marcus for his latest promotion. What she did not know was that I had been secretly paying $61,000 over 2 years to save their house from foreclosure. The moment I revealed this truth, the entire family dynamic shattered like glass, and the revenge that followed was absolutely beautiful. Before we dive into this wild family betrayal story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and smash that like button if you have ever dealt with toxic family dynamics. Subscribe for more real-life drama stories and let me know if you have experienced similar family favoritism. Trust me, you will want to stick around because this revenge story gets absolutely insane and justice is served ice cold. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, our family dinners were sacred traditions that happened every Thursday evening at 6 o'clock sharp. Mom would set the dining room table with her grandmother's china, and we would gather to share our weekly updates. These dinners were supposed to bring us closer together, but they had become my personal nightmare over the past 5 years. The hierarchy in our household was crystal clear from childhood. Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, could do absolutely no wrong in our parents' eyes. He was the star quarterback in high school, graduated summa cum laude from Arizona State University, and landed a prestigious job at a Fortune 500 company straight out of college. Meanwhile, I chose a different path that disappointed them deeply. After high school, I started my own small graphic design business instead of pursuing traditional college education. My parents never understood entrepreneurship. They viewed my business as playing around on computers rather than having a real career. When Marcus bought his first house at 25, they threw him a celebration party. When I reinvested my profits back into expanding my client base, they asked when I would get serious about my future. The constant comparison became suffocating, but I endured it because family meant everything to me. 2 years ago, everything changed when I accidentally discovered something devastating. I had stopped by their house unannounced to drop off some design work I had completed for their neighborhood association newsletter. Dad was not home, and Mom was on the phone in the kitchen speaking in hushed, worried tones. I waited in the living room, not wanting to interrupt, when I heard fragments of her conversation that made my blood run cold. She was talking to someone at the mortgage company about missed payments and foreclosure proceedings. My successful, stable parents were apparently drowning in debt. After she hung up, I confronted her gently, asking if everything was okay financially. The flood of tears and confessions that followed broke my heart completely. Dad had been laid off from his management position 8 months earlier, but had been too proud to tell anyone, including Marcus. They had been living off their savings and credit cards while he searched for new employment. The house they had lived in for 32 years, where Marcus and I had grown up, was now 3 months behind on mortgage payments. They were facing foreclosure within 60 days if they could not catch up on the outstanding balance. Without hesitation, I offered to help them financially. Mom initially refused, saying they could not accept money from their daughter who was still building her own life. But I persisted, explaining that my business had been more successful than they realized, and I had substantial savings available. We agreed that I would quietly help them with mortgage payments until Dad found steady employment again. What started as temporary assistance became a 2-year financial lifeline. Every month, I transferred money into their account to cover not just the mortgage but also utilities, insurance, and other essential expenses. The total amount I contributed reached $61,000, representing nearly everything I had saved for my own future. I never mentioned this arrangement to Marcus because my parents specifically requested privacy about their financial struggles. During this entire period, the Thursday dinner criticism continued relentlessly. Mom would lecture me about my lack of ambition and question why I had not followed Marcus's example of traditional success. Dad would nod along, suggesting I consider returning to school for a business degree or finding a corporate position with benefits. Meanwhile, Marcus would share updates about his latest achievements, promotions, and expensive purchases, while I sat quietly, knowing I was the one keeping our family home from being sold at auction. The irony was devastating. While they praised Marcus for his financial success and stability, I was literally the foundation holding their entire lifestyle together. Marcus remained completely unaware of their situation because maintaining appearances was more important to my parents than acknowledging my sacrifices. They would rather continue treating me like the family disappointment than admit they needed help from their supposedly unsuccessful daughter. The resentment built slowly but steadily. Every criticism stung deeper, knowing what I was doing behind the scenes. Every comparison to Marcus felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I began documenting everything meticulously: bank transfers, mortgage payment confirmations, utility bills I had covered. Something inside me knew this situation would eventually reach a breaking point where evidence would become important. Last month, Dad finally secured a new position with a decent salary, though it paid significantly less than his previous job. I was genuinely happy for him and suggested we gradually transition him back to handling their expenses independently. However, my parents had become comfortable with my financial support and showed no urgency to resume full responsibility for their bills. They seemed to expect I would continue supplementing their income indefinitely while they rebuilt their savings. The final straw came 3 weeks ago when Marcus announced he was considering buying a vacation home in Sedona. Mom and Dad were absolutely thrilled, praising his financial acumen and successful investment strategy. During that same dinner, Mom casually mentioned that I should start thinking about contributing to a family fund for household repairs and maintenance, since I was still living rent-free in their basement. The audacity was breathtaking, but I maintained my composure, planning my response carefully. The drive home from that dinner felt like an out-of-body experience. Sitting in my car outside their house, I realized I had been enabling their delusion for far too long. They genuinely believed Marcus was the successful child, while I was the burden they had to tolerate. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. I was financially supporting their entire lifestyle, while being treated like a disappointment who needed to contribute more. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing this charade indefinitely, I would give them one final opportunity to acknowledge my contributions voluntarily. If they chose to maintain their narrative of my inadequacy, I would reveal the truth in a way that would force them to confront their hypocrisy publicly. I began preparing for what I privately called Operation Reality Check. First, I organized all my financial records, documenting every payment I had made on their behalf. Bank statements, mortgage payment confirmations, utility bills, insurance payments, everything was meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced. The evidence was overwhelming and indisputable. Next, I researched the current market value of their home and calculated exactly how much equity they would have lost if foreclosure had proceeded 2 years ago. The numbers were staggering. Their house had appreciated significantly during the period I was keeping them afloat, meaning my intervention had not only saved their home but also preserved substantial wealth appreciation. They owed me far more than just the $61,000 in direct payments. I also began subtly gathering information about Marcus's actual financial situation. Through casual conversations and social media observation, I discovered some interesting details. His impressive salary was largely offset by substantial student loans, credit card debt, and an expensive lifestyle he maintained to project success. The vacation home he was considering would stretch his finances dangerously thin, despite their parents' admiration for his investment strategy. During this reconnaissance phase, I made another disturbing discovery. Mom had been sharing details about my supposed financial struggles with her sister, my Aunt Patricia. According to Mom's narrative, I was barely making ends meet with my little design hobby and would probably need to move back home permanently because I could not afford independent living. This fictional version of my life was apparently common knowledge among our extended family members. The revelation that Mom had been spreading false information about my circumstances while I was literally funding their survival felt like the ultimate betrayal. Not only were they ungrateful for my sacrifices, they were actively damaging my reputation to maintain their own pride. This discovery transformed my planned revelation from a family conversation into something much more comprehensive. I decided the confrontation needed to happen during a Thursday dinner when the entire family dynamic would be on full display. However, I wanted to ensure maximum impact, so I invited Aunt Patricia and her husband Uncle Robert to join us for what I described as a special family announcement. Mom was thrilled, assuming I was finally going to share some positive news about my career or personal life. The week leading up to the dinner was surreal. I watched my parents prepare for what they expected to be another opportunity to showcase Marcus's accomplishments while downplaying my contributions to the family. Mom even suggested I dress more professionally for the dinner, since we would have guests, implying that my usual appearance was somehow inadequate for family gatherings. During this time, I also made some strategic financial decisions. I stopped making any payments toward their expenses and transferred my remaining savings into a separate account they could not access. If they were going to treat me like a financial liability, they could experience what that actually meant. I was done being their secret safety net while enduring public humiliation. I spent considerable time crafting my revelation strategy. The goal was not just to embarrass them, but to force genuine accountability for their treatment of me. I wanted them to understand exactly how much their pride had cost them, and how deeply their favoritism had damaged our relationship. This was not about money anymore. It was about respect, honesty, and the fundamental dynamics that had poisoned our family interactions for years. Marcus remained completely oblivious to the brewing storm. His latest achievement was a promotion that came with a modest salary increase, which our parents celebrated as if he had won the lottery. During our most recent conversation, he casually mentioned that he was grateful our parents were so financially stable because it meant he could focus on building his own wealth without worrying about supporting them in the future. The irony of his statement was almost too perfect. He was genuinely relieved that our parents did not need financial assistance, completely unaware that I had been providing exactly that support for 2 years. His assumption that they were independently stable while simultaneously viewing me as the unsuccessful sibling created the perfect setup for my upcoming revelation. As Thursday approached, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and sadness. Part of me hoped they would surprise me by finally acknowledging my contributions without prompting. Maybe Mom would spontaneously express gratitude for my help, or Dad would recognize my business success, or Marcus would show some curiosity about my actual financial situation. But deep down, I knew they were too invested in their established narrative to deviate voluntarily. The night before the dinner, I received a text from Mom reminding me to arrive on time and dress appropriately since we would have company. She also mentioned that Marcus had exciting news to share about his vacation home purchase and suggested I think of something positive to contribute to the conversation. The condescending tone was exactly what I expected, and it solidified my resolve to proceed with the confrontation. I spent that evening reviewing my evidence one final time and mentally rehearsing my presentation. Tomorrow would either mark the beginning of a more honest relationship with my family, or the end of my willingness to maintain relationships built on fundamental disrespect. Either outcome felt better than continuing the current charade indefinitely. Thursday evening arrived with the typical pre-dinner chaos. I arrived at 6 o'clock, sharp dressed in my best business attire to meet Mom's expectations. The dining room table was set with extra places for Aunt Patricia, and Uncle Robert and Mom had prepared her signature pot roast dinner that always made the house smell like comfort and nostalgia. Marcus arrived 15 minutes later, practically glowing with excitement about his upcoming vacation home announcement. He hugged our parents warmly and immediately launched into stories about his latest work achievements. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert arrived shortly after, carrying a bottle of expensive wine and expressing enthusiasm about our mysterious family gathering. The dinner conversation followed its predictable pattern initially. Marcus dominated the discussion with detailed descriptions of his promotion, salary, increase, and investment plans. Mom and Dad hung on every word, asking thoughtful questions and offering enthusiastic praise for his financial wisdom and career trajectory. Aunt Patricia made admiring comments about how well he was doing for someone his age. Then the conversation shifted to me, as it inevitably did during these gatherings. Mom asked about my business with the same tone she might use to inquire about a temporary hobby. Dad wondered aloud whether I had considered looking for more stable employment with health benefits and retirement planning. Uncle Robert, who worked in corporate finance, offered to help me find entry-level positions at various companies where connections might be valuable. The condescension was suffocating, but I maintained my composure, knowing that everything was about to change dramatically. When Aunt Patricia gently suggested that I might want to consider moving back home to save money while building my career, Mom immediately agreed, saying they would always have space for me since I clearly needed family support during these challenging times. Marcus then delivered his big announcement about the vacation home purchase. He had found a beautiful property in Sedona with mountain views and hiking trail access. The purchase would stretch his finances temporarily, but he viewed it as a smart investment in Arizona's growing real estate market. Our parents were absolutely thrilled, praising his courage to take calculated risks and his ability to think strategically about wealth building. Dad raised his wine glass in a toast to Marcus's continued success and bright future. Mom dabbed her eyes with pride, saying how grateful she was to have raised such a financially responsible son who would never need parental assistance. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert joined the celebration, expressing confidence that Marcus would achieve even greater success in the coming years. That moment crystallized everything wrong with our family dynamic. They were celebrating Marcus's ability to purchase luxury real estate while simultaneously viewing me as someone who might need to move back into their basement. The irony was so profound it felt almost comedic, except none of them were in on the joke yet. I waited for the toast to conclude before clearing my throat and asking for everyone's attention. The table fell quiet with all eyes focused on me expectantly. Mom looked hopeful, probably assuming I was finally going to announce some positive development in my supposedly struggling career. Instead, I began with a simple question that would shatter their entire worldview. I asked Dad if he remembered being unemployed for 8 months 2 years ago. The color drained from his face immediately. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Marcus looked confused, having no idea what I was referring to. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert exchanged puzzled glances, clearly unaware of any employment issues in our family. Dad stammered something about that being a temporary situation that they had handled privately. Mom quickly tried to change the subject, suggesting we focus on positive topics during our family dinner. But I was just getting started, and their obvious discomfort only strengthened my resolve to continue. I asked them if they remembered being 3 months behind on their mortgage payments and facing foreclosure proceedings. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus dropped his wine glass, which shattered on the hardwood floor, but nobody moved to clean it up. Aunt Patricia gasped audibly, realizing that serious family secrets were being revealed. Then I delivered the information that would change everything permanently. I calmly explained that I had been paying their mortgage, utilities, insurance, and other essential expenses for the past 2 years. The total amount of my contributions was $61,000, representing nearly all of my business profits and personal savings during that period. Uncle Robert, who understood finances better than anyone at the table, immediately grasped the magnitude of what I had done. He asked for clarification about the timeline and amounts, his professional instincts taking over despite the family drama unfolding. When I confirmed the details, he whistled softly and shook his head in amazement. Aunt Patricia looked directly at Mom and asked why she had been told I was struggling financially and might need to move back home. The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to drop. Mom's face turned bright red as she realized her fictional narrative was being exposed in front of witnesses who could verify the truth. Marcus finally found his voice and asked how this was possible. He had assumed our parents were financially stable and had never suspected they needed assistance. When I explained that they had specifically requested privacy about their situation, he looked betrayed and confused about why such important family information had been kept from him. I pulled out my folder of financial documentation and began presenting evidence methodically. Bank transfer receipts, mortgage payment confirmations, utility bills. Everything was organized chronologically and cross-referenced for clarity. Uncle Robert examined some of the documents and confirmed their authenticity, his corporate finance background making him a credible witness. The mathematical reality was inescapable. Without my intervention, they would have lost their home to foreclosure. The house had appreciated significantly during the period I was supporting them, meaning my financial assistance had preserved substantial equity that would have been lost forever. They had not just benefited from my monthly payments, they had benefited from continued property ownership during a favorable real estate market. Aunt Patricia asked Mom directly why she had been spreading false information about my financial situation while I was literally supporting their household. The question forced Mom to confront her hypocrisy publicly, with family witnesses present to remember her response. There was no way to deflect or minimize the contradiction between her words and reality. Dad attempted to defend their behavior by saying they had been embarrassed about their temporary financial difficulties and grateful for my help, but I quickly pointed out that gratitude and embarrassment did not justify 2 years of public criticism about my career choices and lifestyle decisions. They had been treating me like a disappointment while I was functioning as their financial lifeline. The mood at the table had shifted completely. What began as a celebration of Marcus's success had become a reckoning with fundamental family dishonesty. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert were clearly uncomfortable witnessing such private revelations, but they also seemed genuinely shocked by the extent of the deception that had been maintained. Marcus looked particularly shaken because he was realizing how much family reality he had missed. His assumption that our parents were independently stable had influenced his own financial planning and investment decisions. The vacation home purchase he had just announced suddenly seemed less wise given the family's actual circumstances. I could see the wheels turning in everyone's minds as they processed the implications of what they had learned. The family hierarchy that had seemed so clear and established was crumbling in real time. The successful son and disappointing daughter narrative could not survive contact with documented evidence of who had actually been providing stability and support. But I was not finished yet. The revelation of my financial contributions was just the foundation for what came next. The real confrontation was about to begin, and I wanted to make sure everyone understood exactly how deep their betrayal had been. This dinner was about to become legendary for all the wrong reasons, and justice was finally going to be served ice cold. What happens next will shock you even more. Keep watching to see how this family drama reaches its explosive climax. The silence at the dinner table was suffocating as everyone processed the bombshell I had just dropped. But I was far from finished. The financial revelation was merely the opening act of a performance that would expose years of systematic disrespect and manipulation. I looked directly at Mom and asked her to explain to Aunt Patricia exactly what she had told her about my living situation and career prospects. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, unable to formulate a response that would not further incriminate her. The seconds stretched endlessly as everyone waited for her justification. When she remained silent, I took the liberty of sharing what I had discovered. I explained how Mom had been telling extended family members that I was barely surviving financially, that my business was failing, and that I would probably need to move back home because I could not afford independent living. These lies had been spreading throughout our family network, while I was literally keeping their household from financial collapse. Aunt Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to anger as she realized the extent of the deception. She turned to Mom and asked pointedly why she would damage her own daughter's reputation while that same daughter was sacrificing her future to save their home. The question hung in the air like an accusation that demanded immediate answers. Uncle Robert, ever the analytical mind, began connecting the dots out loud. He pointed out that my business must be significantly more successful than anyone realized for me to have $61,000 available for family assistance. He wondered aloud why parents would criticize a daughter who was clearly thriving financially while secretly depending on her generosity for survival. Marcus finally found his voice and asked the question that cut to the heart of everything. Why had they kept him completely in the dark about their financial crisis while accepting help from me? His confusion was genuine and painful to watch. The golden child was discovering that his favored status came with the cost of being excluded from real family challenges. Dad attempted to justify their secrecy by explaining that they had not wanted to burden Marcus when he was building his own career and making important financial decisions like purchasing his first home. The explanation only made things worse because it highlighted the double standard perfectly. They protected Marcus from family stress while expecting me to shoulder it completely. I seized on this point immediately. I asked them directly why Marcus deserved protection from family financial problems, while I deserved criticism for my career choices during the exact period I was solving their financial problems. The logic was inescapable and damning. They had systematically favored one child while exploiting the other. The conversation took an even darker turn when I revealed the final piece of evidence I had been saving. I pulled out my phone and showed them screenshots of text messages between Mom and Aunt Patricia, where Mom had explicitly described me as irresponsible with money and unlikely to achieve financial independence. The timestamps on these messages corresponded directly with periods when I was making their mortgage payments. Aunt Patricia gasped when she saw her own responses to these messages, where she had expressed concern about my future and offered to help me find more stable employment. She realized she had been participating in character assassination based on completely false information. Her face flushed with embarrassment and anger at being manipulated into enabling their narrative. Uncle Robert asked to see my business financial statements, genuinely curious about the success I had been hiding. When I showed him my profit margins and client portfolio, his eyebrows shot up in surprise. He confirmed to the table that my graphic design business was not only successful but impressively so for someone my age. The revelation added another layer of absurdity to their treatment of me. Marcus looked increasingly uncomfortable as he began to understand the full picture. His recent promotion and salary increase, which had been celebrated so enthusiastically, paled in comparison to my actual business income. The family hierarchy he had enjoyed was built entirely on false premises and deliberate information manipulation. I decided to drive the point home with mathematical precision. I calculated out loud exactly how much their mortgage payments, insurance, utilities, and other bills had cost during my 2-year support period. Then I compared that figure to what Marcus had spent on discretionary purchases like expensive electronics, luxury clothing, and entertainment during the same time frame. The numbers were staggering. While Marcus was spending money on lifestyle upgrades and status symbols, I was quietly paying for their basic survival needs. The comparison highlighted not just their financial dependence on me, but also their complete misunderstanding of where real family support was coming from. Dad made a last desperate attempt to salvage the situation by suggesting that we were all family, and these details should not matter between relatives who loved each other. His platitude fell flat, because it ignored the fundamental dishonesty and disrespect that had characterized their treatment of me for years. I responded by asking him directly whether he thought love included publicly humiliating someone while privately depending on their financial support. Did love include spreading false information about someone's character and prospects? Did love include systematically favoring one child while taking advantage of another's generosity? The questions forced him to confront the cognitive dissonance that had allowed them to maintain their behavior for so long. They had convinced themselves that accepting my help while criticizing my life choices was somehow compatible with genuine family affection. Aunt Patricia finally broke the uncomfortable silence by addressing Mom directly. She demanded to know whether any of the family financial advice and concern she had expressed over the years had been based on accurate information. She was beginning to realize that her entire understanding of family dynamics had been shaped by deliberate misinformation. Mom finally spoke, but instead of accepting responsibility, she became defensive. She argued that they had never asked for my help and that I had volunteered to assist them during a difficult period. She suggested that my decision to help financially did not give me the right to criticize their parenting or family dynamics. The response was so tone-deaf and self-serving that even Marcus visibly recoiled. Uncle Robert actually laughed in disbelief at her attempt to frame my generosity as some kind of manipulation tactic. The complete lack of accountability was breathtaking in its audacity. I stood up from the table and calmly announced that I was done with this conversation and this family dynamic permanently. I had spent 2 years sacrificing my financial future to preserve theirs, only to be repaid with lies, disrespect, and systematic character assassination. This dinner would be my last participation in their toxic family theater. The room erupted as everyone began talking at once. Marcus was demanding more explanations about their financial situation. Aunt Patricia was confronting Mom about the lies she had been told. Uncle Robert was calculating the full economic impact of my contributions. Dad was trying unsuccessfully to calm everyone down. But I was already walking toward the door, leaving behind the chaos I had created. The truth had finally been revealed in all its devastating clarity, and the consequences would unfold exactly as they deserved. Justice was being served, and it tasted absolutely perfect. The phone calls started within hours of my dramatic exit from dinner. First Marcus called, then Aunt Patricia, followed by Uncle Robert, and eventually even some extended family members I had not spoken to in months. Word was spreading fast through our family network, and the carefully constructed narrative my parents had maintained for years was collapsing spectacularly. Marcus was the most persistent caller, clearly shaken by the revelation that our family dynamics were built on fundamental deceptions he had never suspected. When I finally answered his 5th call, he sounded genuinely distraught. He had spent the entire evening after I left, trying to understand how he could have been so completely oblivious to our parents' financial crisis and my role in resolving it. He apologized repeatedly for participating in the criticism of my career choices, explaining that he had genuinely believed I was struggling financially based on what our parents had told him. The revelation that I had been more successful than him while appearing to struggle had shattered his understanding of our family completely. What surprised me most was his anger toward our parents. He felt manipulated and deceived, not just about their financial situation but about my actual circumstances and contributions. The golden child treatment he had enjoyed suddenly felt hollow and artificial, knowing it was built on systematic lies about his sister's supposed failures. Aunt Patricia called to express her horror at being used to spread false information about me. She had been sharing her concerns about my financial prospects with other family members, genuinely worried about my future based on what Mom had told her. Discovering that she had been unknowingly participating in character assassination made her furious. She demanded a full accounting from Mom about what other family information might be distorted or completely fabricated. The conversation between them was apparently explosive, with Aunt Patricia questioning whether she could trust anything Mom had told her about family matters over the years. Uncle Robert approached the situation from his analytical corporate background, focusing on the financial implications of what had been revealed. He calculated that my contributions had not only prevented foreclosure, but had actually preserved substantial equity appreciation during a favorable real estate market. The total economic value of my intervention was potentially much higher than the $61,000 in direct payments. He also pointed out the legal implications of their behavior. While family financial assistance was generally considered a gift, the systematic deception and character damage they had caused might create grounds for civil action if I chose to pursue it. He offered to help me document everything for potential future legal proceedings. The extended family response was swift and brutal for my parents. Word spread quickly that the family's financial stability had been entirely dependent on the daughter they constantly criticized, while the son they celebrated had been completely unaware of the real situation. The social humiliation was immediate and devastating. Several family members called to apologize for believing the false narrative about my circumstances. Others expressed anger at being misled and used to reinforce lies about my character and prospects. The reputation damage my parents had caused themselves by lying was far worse than any embarrassment they might have experienced by simply telling the truth about their financial difficulties. Meanwhile, the immediate practical consequences of my withdrawal became apparent quickly. I had stopped making any payments toward their expenses the week before the dinner confrontation, and they were already feeling the financial impact. Without my monthly contributions, they were struggling to cover basic bills and mortgage payments on Dad's reduced salary alone. Dad called 3 days after the dinner, attempting to negotiate some kind of continuation of financial support. He suggested we could work out a formal loan arrangement with interest and repayment terms that would make everyone comfortable. The proposal completely missed the point. This was not about money anymore, it was about respect and honesty. I declined his offer and explained that our financial arrangement was permanently terminated. They would need to adjust their lifestyle and expenses to match their actual income, just like every other family in their situation. The safety net I had provided was gone forever, and they would have to face the consequences of their choices. Mom took a different approach, calling to offer a partial apology for not expressing enough gratitude for my help. She suggested that we could move forward as a family if everyone just focused on the positive aspects of our relationships rather than dwelling on misunderstandings from the past. Her attempt to frame systematic deception and character assassination as mere misunderstandings was so insulting that I hung up on her mid-sentence. The complete lack of accountability and genuine remorse confirmed that she still did not understand the magnitude of her betrayal. The social consequences extended beyond our immediate family. Other relatives began questioning what they thought they knew about various family members and situations. If Mom had lied so extensively about my circumstances, what other family information might be fabricated or distorted? Trust within our extended family network began eroding rapidly. Marcus attempted to serve as a mediator, suggesting family counseling or mediated conversations to repair our relationships. He genuinely wanted to fix things, but he still did not fully grasp that some betrayals cannot be undone with apologies and good intentions. The foundation of trust and respect needed for family relationships had been destroyed permanently. I discovered through mutual friends that my parents were beginning to face serious financial pressure without my support. They had become accustomed to a lifestyle that required my monthly contributions, and adjusting back to their actual income was proving difficult. The expensive dinners, home improvements, and other expenses they had maintained while I was supporting them were no longer sustainable. The irony was perfect. They had criticized my financial responsibility while depending entirely on my financial support. Now they were experiencing the reality of living within their actual means, and it was far less comfortable than the artificially elevated lifestyle my generosity had provided. Word also reached me that Marcus had postponed his vacation home purchase indefinitely. Learning about our family's real financial situation had made him realize that his assumption of parental stability was false, and he needed to reconsider his own financial planning in case they needed future assistance. The vacation home postponement was particularly satisfying because it represented the collapse of the false financial hierarchy that had dominated our family for years. The successful son, who never needed to worry about supporting his parents, was discovering that his entire financial strategy had been built on incorrect assumptions about family stability. 3 weeks after the dinner confrontation, I received a final, desperate call from Dad. Their mortgage payment was overdue again, and they were facing the same foreclosure proceedings that had threatened them 2 years earlier. He begged me to reconsider helping them, promising that things would be different if I gave them another chance. I listened to his entire plea before delivering my final response. I told him that they had already shown me exactly who they were when they thought they could use me without consequences. Their financial crisis was now their responsibility to solve, just like it should have been from the beginning. The conversation ended with him crying, but I felt nothing except calm satisfaction. Justice was not just being served, it was being savored slowly and thoroughly. 6 months have passed since that explosive dinner confrontation, and the aftermath has exceeded even my most optimistic expectations for justice and personal growth. The complete collapse of my family's false narrative has created space for authentic relationships built on truth rather than manipulation and favoritism. The immediate practical consequences for my parents were swift and educational. Without my financial support, they were forced to downsize their lifestyle dramatically. The large family home where I grew up was ultimately sold, with proceeds going toward paying down debt and purchasing a modest condominium that matched their actual income level. Watching them navigate real financial consequences for the first time in years was oddly therapeutic. They had to make the same difficult choices that millions of families face when living within their means. The expensive dinners, home improvements, and casual spending that my contributions had enabled disappeared overnight, replaced by careful budgeting and conscious spending decisions. Marcus experienced his own journey of awakening and growth during this period. Initially devastated by the revelation of family deception, he eventually channeled his anger into positive action. He began questioning other assumptions he had made about success, family dynamics, and his own privileged position within our household structure. Most importantly, he reached out to establish a genuine relationship with me for the first time in our adult lives. Without our parents mediating and manipulating our interactions, we discovered we actually enjoyed each other's company and had more in common than we realized. The artificial sibling rivalry that had been fostered by parental favoritism dissolved when we started communicating directly and honestly. Marcus also made financial amends for his unconscious participation in the family dynamic that had exploited my generosity. When he learned the full extent of what I had sacrificed to support our parents, he insisted on contributing to a fund for my future investment opportunities. His gesture was meaningful not because of the money, but because it represented genuine acknowledgement of my contributions and sacrifices. The extended family response created the most satisfying long-term consequences. Aunt Patricia became a fierce advocate for me, making sure that anyone who had heard Mom's false narrative about my circumstances also learned the truth about my financial success and family contributions. The reputation rehabilitation was swift and complete. Uncle Robert proved invaluable in helping me restructure my financial future after years of depleting my savings for family support. His corporate finance expertise helped me develop investment strategies and business expansion plans that would rebuild my wealth more effectively than before. The knowledge and connections he provided were worth more than any direct financial assistance. Several other family members reached out to apologize for believing false information about my circumstances and to express admiration for my business success and family loyalty. The shift in family perception was dramatic. I went from being viewed as the struggling daughter to being recognized as the most financially successful and generous family member. My business flourished during this period, partly because I was no longer draining my profits to support family expenses, but also because the stress of maintaining false appearances had been lifted. Without the emotional burden of secret financial sacrifice, my creativity and professional focus improved significantly. I also discovered the joy of chosen family relationships. Friends who had supported me through years of family drama became closer than ever, and new relationships developed with people who appreciated my authentic self rather than tolerating my supposed failures. Building relationships based on truth rather than manipulation felt revolutionary. The most unexpected development was romantic. During this period of personal growth and financial recovery, I met someone who valued my entrepreneurial spirit, financial independence, and strong boundaries with toxic family dynamics. Having a partner who supported my decisions and understood my worth created a stark contrast to years of family criticism and diminishment. My parents eventually attempted reconciliation through various intermediaries, but their approach remained fundamentally flawed. They focused on family forgiveness and moving forward rather than genuine accountability for their behavior. Every overture demonstrated that they still did not understand the magnitude of their betrayal or the damage they had caused. Dad wrote a letter attempting to explain their behavior during his unemployment period, suggesting that pride and embarrassment had caused poor judgment, but that underlying family love should overcome temporary misunderstandings. The letter completely missed the point that this was not about temporary poor judgment but about years of systematic deception and character assassination. Mom made several attempts to reach out through mutual friends, always focusing on her desire to rebuild our relationship, rather than acknowledging the specific harms she had caused. Her inability to take genuine responsibility for spreading false information about me, while accepting my financial support, revealed that she remained fundamentally unchanged. Their failed reconciliation attempts actually strengthened my resolve and confirmed the wisdom of maintaining strict boundaries. People who cannot acknowledge their harmful behavior will inevitably repeat it when given opportunities. Protecting myself from future manipulation required permanent distance from their toxic dynamic. The legal consultation Uncle Robert had suggested proved unnecessary because the natural consequences of their behavior were more effective than any formal legal action could have been. Social ostracism, financial hardship, and family fragmentation created accountability that court proceedings could never have achieved. Marcus and I developed holiday traditions that excluded our parents but included chosen family members and supportive relatives. Creating new traditions based on mutual respect and genuine affection felt healing in ways I had not anticipated. We were building the family dynamic we should have had all along. My business success continued accelerating as I channeled energy previously wasted on family drama into professional growth and personal development. The financial security I rebuilt exceeded my previous savings, and the psychological freedom from toxic family expectations enhanced every aspect of my life. Looking back, that explosive dinner confrontation was the best investment in my future happiness I ever made. The short-term pain of family conflict was nothing compared to the long-term gain of authentic relationships and genuine self-respect. The most profound lesson was understanding that family loyalty should never require accepting systematic disrespect and deception. Real love includes honesty, accountability, and mutual support rather than manipulation and exploitation masked as tradition. Today, my life is richer, my relationships are healthier, and my financial future is secure because I chose truth over comfortable lies. The revenge was sweet, but the personal growth and authentic connections that followed were even sweeter. Sometimes the best gift you can give toxic family members is the natural consequences of their choices. Justice served ice cold turned out to be exactly the temperature needed for genuine healing and positive transformation. Have you ever discovered that family members were spreading lies about you while secretly depending on your support? How did you handle the betrayal when loyalty was not reciprocated? Share your own family karma stories in the comments below. Because these situations are more common than people realize. If this story resonated with your own experiences with toxic family dynamics, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama stories about standing up for yourself when family relationships become exploitative. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that choosing self-respect over family peace is sometimes the healthiest decision you can make, and remember that you deserve relationships built on truth and mutual respect rather than obligation and manipulation. Thank you for joining me on this journey from family exploitation to personal empowerment, and may you always have the courage to demand the respect and honesty that genuine love requires.